यही दिक्कत है इसकी। पहले जो शेयर हुए तो पहले आ रही थी आवाज, पहले तो सुना रही थी। अरे यार मेरा स्क्वायर वैक्सी नहीं है इसमें, कहाँ गया?
ये सब ये तो
हेलो, गुड मॉर्निंग, कौन? ठीक है, आपको लिंक अभी दे देंगे, मैं टीम विल कॉन्टेक्ट। थैंक यू। सब मुझे ही देखेगा। स्क्रीन से शेयर करो। भेज तो दो अभी, ये लोग माननीय लोग अभी मुझे करते हैं।
Is there any program today at school?
Yes, today it's World Day of International Justice. Come on, let's hurry to school.
What's so special about this International Justice Day?
The theme of World Day of Social Justice 2020 is it focuses on social justice as it is the global mission of the UN to promote the development and human dignity.
Every year on July 17, World Day for International Justice is observed all around the world. The aim of the day is to promote international criminal justice and as a way of supporting the work of ICC.
What is ICC?
ICC stands for the International Criminal Court. It came about when 120 states adopted a statute in Rome. It was known as the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court.
Without justice, there can be no law.
Without justice, there is no peace.
Without justice, courage is weak.
Justice is important as it ensures all citizens are treated fairly and impartially.
Justice is important because wrong is ended and society becomes safe.
So let's build a world with love and peace.
Hi, I'm Atman Nurdin, studying at KT Public School in grade 8.
Hi, I'm Mohammad Rusham studying at KT Public School in grade 5.
Hi, I'm Rima Salim studying at KT Public School in grade 4.
Hi, I'm Zaba Fatima studying at KT Public School, grade 8.
Hi, I'm Raban Riaz, studying at KT Public School in grade 6. Thank you for watching us.
YouTube में soon we will be starting our lecture series on World Day for International Justice. I hope I am audible. Can somebody confirm by raising? Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, our chief guest has already joined. I have some small brief announcements and requests to make. Please keep your this platform in live mode and keep mute your platform. And please ensure that you must have high-speed internet connectivity so that e-learning can go uninterrupted and without buffering. The trainees must be sensitized. You all are already sensitized that the deliberations during training session are confidential. These are meant for learning and cannot be shared on any other platform. And please keep your laptop. Once again, I iterated that please keep your platform in mute condition so that the speaker, you will be able to listen the voice of the speaker clearly. And it is also requested that if you have any queries, please raise it at the end of the session. Good morning to everyone present over here and whosoever has joined. Let me introduce myself. I am Parvez Aslam Ansari, Assistant Director, the coordinator for the online lecture series on international justice. On behalf of entire team of CAPT and participants, I take this opportunity to welcome our guests. I would like to express our gratitude to Sir for having graciously acceded to our request to be part of this event. We are really thankful to you, sir, for taking a time out of your busy schedule to attend the function. Further, I welcome all the participants from state police, various police organizations, and all the academicians for attending this series. The aim of the day is to promote international criminal justice and as a way of supporting the work of ICC, and also to unite everyone who wants to support justice. Considering the importance and solemnity of the occasion, CAPT Bhopal is initiating lecture series to propagate the message and awareness during World Day of International Justice. Every year, one prominent, eminent speaker being invited for delivering lecture to express solidarity with humanity and how we should come together and ensure justice. This has been designed to impart knowledge to CAPF, police, prosecution officers, NGOs, civil administrators, academicians also, without causing any hindrance in regular activities. Now, before inviting the Deputy Director, CAPT Bhopal, for the opening remarks, let me introduce to Shri Anuj Kumar Singh, DIG, Deputy Director, BPR&D. He joined BPR&D in July 2022 and is DIG Modernization at Bureau Headquarters. He is presently on attachment to CAPT Bhopal. He was on deputation in SPG, Special Protection Group, from 2005 to 11, and also headed technical branch of SPG as AIG Tech. He is a highly decorated officer. He was awarded President's Police Medal for meritorious services in 2017. He has also been awarded Asadharan Asuchana Padak of Union Home Minister for his notable contribution towards national intelligence setup. He has been awarded DG-ITBP's Commendation Roll and insignia on 4 occasions for the praiseworthy performance. He was recently awarded Commendation Disc of DG BPR&D for his notable contribution during his tenure in SPG. His commendable services were recognized by award of more than 25 appreciations by Director SPG. Now, without taking much of time, I request from Deputy Director Sir for his opening remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Pervez. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Loud and clear, sir.
Okay, thank you. I welcome all the participants for this special webinar on the World Day for International Justice. Good morning, all ladies and gentlemen. Foundation of any democratic country and civilized society is justice. Justice is a concept of moral rightness based on ethics, rationality, natural law, or equity. It is also the act of being just and or fair. Democracy based on freedom, protection of human rights, rule of law, and ensures fairness, individual liberty, and justice. The quest for justice has been an ideal which mankind has been aspiring for generations down the line. Mahatma Gandhi, during the Dandi March in 1930, said, "Law is unable to render justice, cannot be a just law." Indian Constitution provides justice for all. The preamble contains justice, social justice, economical equality, political equality for all. The Constitution Day is celebrated on 26 November every year to commemorate the adoption of the Constitution on 26 November 1949 by the Constituent Assembly of India, though all the articles came into effect from 26 January 1950. The World Day for International Justice, also referred to as Day of International Criminal Justice or International Justice Day, is celebrated on July 17th. July 17th is the date of the adoption of the Treaty Rome Statute held in Kampala, Uganda in 1998 that created the International Criminal Court. On the 1st June 2010, at the Review Conference of the Assembly of State Parties, decided to celebrate 17th July as the Day of International Criminal Justice. Founding Day of the International Criminal Court marks the importance of fighting against impunity and bringing justice for the victims of war crimes, crime against humanity, and genocide. These celebrations highlight how international justice tribunals and courts have brought and continue to bring justice for the victims of war crimes and crime against humanity. It also commemorates the day the Rome Statute was adopted globally, and it ensures member nations of the International Criminal Court live up to their expectations. Not taking much time, I again welcome all the participants, and I hope that today's webinar will provide a good opportunity for all to deliberate on the important subject. Now I hand it over to Mr. Pervez. Pervez.
Thank you very much, sir, for your precious words. As we move on with further sequence, please allow me to introduce our eminent speaker to the audience, Dr. Soumya Uma, Professor at Jindal Global Law School and heads at Center for Women's Rights. She has over 29 years combined work experience as an academic, law researcher, lawyer, trainer, writer, and campaigner working at the intersections of gender, law, and human rights. She has also served as a research consultant on human rights with international agencies such as the United Nations Development Fund, United Nations Office of the High Commissioner on Human Rights, and the International Commission of Jurists. Dr. Uma holds a BA LLB honors from National Law School of India, Bangalore, two postgraduate law degrees, LLM in Family Law and Human Rights from the University of Mumbai, India, and LLM in International Human Rights at the University of Nottingham, UK. She received a prestigious British Chevening Scholarship for Human Rights administered by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, United Nations, for pursuing the latter degree. She completed her doctoral research from her alma mater, NLSIU. The research focused on developing an Indian legal framework on victim and witness protection with a specific reference to gender-based violence. Dr. Uma has several years of teaching experience at renowned universities in India such as National Law School of India, Maharashtra National Law University, Mumbai, and Dr. B.R. Ambedkar University, Delhi. Prior to joining Jindal Global Law School in January 2020, now I request from the eminent speaker for her session. I am going to give her presenter right. She has some technical glitches. Till that time, please watch this video.
The Central Academy for Police Training is a Union Cabinet approved Rs 281 crores project of the Ministry of Home Affairs under the aegis of Bureau of Police Research and Development, mandated to train the directly recruited deputy superintendents of the state and the police trainees. With a humble beginning from rented office space in 2012, the academy shifted to prefabricated huts in 2014 to its new premise in 2018. The 400-acre barren land given by MP government free of cost has been since converted into a green and clean campus with initiatives such as paperless office, water harvesting, composting and use of solar energy. The academy has state-of-the-art infrastructure with audio-visual enabled 18 smart classrooms, 240-seater auditorium, adequate number of office for the staff, 2 computer labs, full-fledged forensic science lab block, library with audio-visual lab, armory, sports complex, model police station, 4 different hostels with 297 single bedrooms, and 132 quarters for its 244 staff. The academy has a fiber optic backbone to connect all the buildings for data, telephones and CCTV. The academy has 4 national centers for traffic technologies, prosecution, prison administration and drug law enforcement. Besides the basic school, the academy organized 4 national level conferences every year, starting from just 3 courses in the year of its inception and 115 trainees. The academy has grown leaps and bounds to have trained more than 8,500 trainees in 99 courses in the year 2020-2021. The academy is a pioneer institution of the Ministry of External Affairs ITEC program and trains police officers of friendly countries. The academy also partners with the Department of Homeland Security to train police officers under the Terrorism Assistance Program. The academy has also trained the newly recruited DSPs and prosecution officers of the Madhya Pradesh government. The ethos of the academy is the judicious use of the environment, sustainable development and doing things by own hands. Each staff member of the academy does multitasking, organizing the courses, teaching, upkeep and maintenance of infrastructure, liaison with state, public outreach program, running a nursery school, community participation in cultural and religious festivals, regular interaction of all the staff in the monthly Sainik Sammelans, and numerous other activities. The academy has been awarded with 2 ISO certificates for office and environment management. The academy has also been awarded with the Union Home Minister's Trophy for Best Police Training Institution for the year 2019-2020. We welcome you all at Central Academy for Police Training, your own academy.
Next speaker has already joined. She will be going to present her session.
Good morning, sir. Are you able to, am I audible?
Audible and visible also. The video is
Hello?
also visible.
Hello?
You are visible and audible also. We are getting your voice.
You're getting my voice?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Please start. Over to you, ma'am. Session is over to you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you to the Central Academy for Police Training for inviting me today on this very important day of International World Day for International Justice. I'm sorry I'm delayed by a few minutes because I had a meeting at the university which was called for yesterday. So I just had to attend that, and I'm finishing that meeting and joining you all here. Is my PowerPoint presentation visible?
Yes, it's visible, ma'am. Kindly put it on maximize mode or slideshow mode. You have to click on from beginning. Yes, from beginning.
Is this fine?
Yes, now it's fine, ma'am.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you. So I have been told that my presentation will be for about 40 minutes. So I'll speak for about 40 minutes. And after that, we will have an interaction. So this is what this is the scheme. So the topic that I'm speaking on is justice for all, relevance of international human rights and national human rights law. So I will be focusing around 50% of my talk on international human rights law framework and how that is relevant for us. And then I will move on to the national human rights law as well. So this is the synopsis of what I will be speaking. So I'll start with the significance of World Day for International Justice. I'm sure in the introductory comments, this would have already been touched upon. So what I will be doing is only reiterating that. Then I move on to features of human rights, Universal Declaration of Human Rights, categories of human rights, and a little more focus on International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, which is quite relevant for us in terms of its connection with the police force, UN human rights treaties, responsibility for protecting human rights, enforcement mechanisms. So all of this is related, the topics in the box on the left, those are all related to international human rights standards. And then I plan to move on to the topics in the box on the right, that is human rights and policing, role of police in protecting human rights, Supreme Court judgments on human rights and criminal law, police responsibilities, police reform, challenges to implementation, and then I will end with some questions which are basically prompts for our discussion. And then, of course, I will also look forward to the questions that are posed by all of you. So let me start with the significance of International Day World Day for International Justice. This is also known as the International Criminal Justice Day or International Justice Day. This was the day when the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court was adopted by the global community in 1998. Before 1998, there was no International Criminal Court. So whenever there were serious crimes under international law that were committed, these the most serious crimes under international law are genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. The crime of aggression was added through the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. But prior to that, we have seen after First World War, Second World War, after Second World War, there was the Nuremberg Tribunal, Tokyo Tribunal, which actually tried people who were accused of genocide and crimes against humanity. Then in the 1990s, the UN Security Council established certain international criminal tribunals. So there was an international criminal tribunal that was established for former Yugoslavia. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the genocides in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So the former Yugoslavia. So there was an international criminal tribunal which was established to try the accused persons for genocide and crimes against humanity. Subsequently, there was the genocide in Rwanda, in the African continent. And after that, there was an international criminal tribunal on Rwanda, which also was established by the UN Security Council. So while all this was happening, there was also a continuous process of trying to establish a permanent international criminal court, so that each time there is a genocide somewhere, there is a massive crimes against humanity somewhere, the UN Security Council does not have to establish special tribunals. If there is a permanent international court, criminal court, then this could prosecute. So that was the idea, and that then came to be in 1998. It was adopted. That is the Rome Statute of International Criminal Court. It was adopted by the global community in 1998. The Indian government was a part of the drafting process of the International Criminal Court. But in the final stages, when in 1998, when the final statute, when it saw the contents of the final statute, the Indian government did not ratify. So till date, the Indian government has not ratified the International Criminal Court. However, the International Criminal Court is part of the international legal standards that we have today. So it doesn't have a direct binding value on us in India. However, it does have a moral value, it has a persuasive value, and this International Criminal Court prosecutes individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, and aggression. Although the Rome Statute was adopted in 1998, it became functional in 2002. That is when it received, I think it received 60 ratifications. So ratified by 60 countries. That's when it started functioning. This year has a special significance, in fact, because this year is the 25th year of adoption of the Rome Statute. So I'm very happy that CAPT has, scheduled today's program, because this year is especially significant. In fact, 2 or 3 days ago, there was an international webinar which was related to the International Criminal Court, and I was invited as a panelist to speak on victims' rights and the ICC. So I think this is a very important year, and it's significant as well. The vision of the ICC is as a court of last resort. So it is a safety net to ensure accountability of perpetrators of serious crimes under international law. So it is to prosecute individuals, not states, and whoever they may be, whatever may be their political position or their social position or their economic clout, irrespective of all of that, the ICC can prosecute individuals if they are accused of these most serious crimes under international law. So, as I mentioned earlier, India is not a state party to the ICC statute, but we can still learn from the international justice mechanism, and the ICC statute inspires domestic law reform initiatives throughout the world, whether it is on victims' rights, whether it is on witness protection, and so on, gender-based violence and sexual and gender-based violence. There are very uh, important ways in which expertise of personnel on sexual and gender-based violence has been incorporated within the International Criminal Court. So those are all lessons for us. We can learn from these processes, and we can try and see to what extent within India, within the court structures, within the police structures, within the enforcement personnel structures within India, to what extent can we incorporate some of these standards? So this is an ongoing civil society initiative in India. Now, international justice is very much related to international human rights, right? So if we don't have human rights, it's very difficult to have justice. Respecting, protecting, fulfilling human rights is a very important aspect of international justice, which is why, by making this linkage on this World Day of International Justice, I would like to focus in my talk on human rights and the importance of human rights. So, features of human rights, I think all of us know this. Probably there have been other speakers in the past who have spoken about this, so I'm not going to elaborate too much on this. So human rights are fundamental. They are basic to all human beings. These are inherent in every human being. These are also universal. So we can't really say that, the citizens of X country have human rights, but the citizens of Y country don't have human rights. We can't say that. By virtue of the fact that somebody is a human being, they have certain inherent human rights. So human rights are very closely related to human dignity, to peace, and to development. In fact, I'm sure all of you are aware of the sustainable goals of development, sustainable development goals, also called SDGs. So human rights are very much linked to that as well. And the Indian government is also trying its best to fulfill the sustainable development goals. So one of those is about justice, and many of those, whether it is right to peace, right to education, right to food, health, sanitation, all of these are human rights. So human rights, peace, development, justice, all of these are very much linked. Human rights are also indivisible, inalienable, and irrevocable. What do I mean by that? We cannot divide the human rights. We can't say that, okay, I'm revoking your human right to life. There are certain very specific conditions under which the state can take away a person's life. But even on death penalty, I'm sure all of you are aware that internationally there is a campaign on abolition of death penalty. Many countries have abolished the death penalty from their statutes, from their legal systems. Human rights are also interconnected and interdependent. So, for example, right to food and right to work are very much connected human rights. If one doesn't have food, doesn't have access to food, water, sanitation, it will be very difficult to fulfill their right to work. And these are then related to the person's right to life as well. That's just an example. And human rights are dynamic and they are ever changing. So they are not static. As the society moves, the human rights also moves. This is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I'm not going to go into the details, but I'm using this slide only to show what are the range of human rights that we have. Just to show that I'm using this slide. So we have a right to rest, play, right to work, right to education, right to be free, right to get married, right to seek justice, right to equal protection under the law. So there are many of these which are spelt out in 1948. And we had an Indian representative who was part of the drafting Universal Human Rights as well. Hansa Mehta was a part of this committee and the outcome. Categories of human rights, if we look at, we can broadly categorize it as civil rights, political rights, social rights, economic, and in fact, which are International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, International Covenant for Social, Economic, and Cultural Rights. Both of these covenants, they have elaborated on specific rights given under the Universal Declaration. And these two covenants came in 1966, and both these covenants have been ratified by India, which means that its provisions are binding on India. In addition to all these 5 categories that I've mentioned, there are also what is called group or collective rights. One of the criticisms about human rights is that it is very individual oriented, whereas in a country like India, many of our rights are collective rights. They are rights of a community. They are rights of, for example, the right to development or the right to environment. So these are not individual rights. These are group rights. These are rights of a community as a whole. So these are also evolving over a period of time. A little more closely, I want to emphasize on International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, because some of this relates to the work that each of you does, the policing work that each of you does. So it may be, you may find this more relevant. So right to equality without discrimination, equal before the law, equal protection of the law. I'm sure you find this language very familiar because we have a similar language in the Indian Constitution as well, Article 14. So the language at the time when the Universal Declaration of Human Rights was being formulated, that is the time when it was adopted by the Constituent Assembly. You find which was economic civil rights, right to life, no arbitrary deprivation, death penalty only for the most serious crimes. This is written in the International Covenant, which is binding on India. Right against torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. This is another provision. Right to liberty and security of person, no arbitrary arrest or detention. This is a very, very important right. And we know that within India, we have Supreme Court judgments, we have High Court judgments. We also have NHRC guidelines about arrest, about detention, and so on. So I will touch upon that a little later. all persons deprived of their liberty should be treated with humanity and respect for inherent dignity, equal treatment by courts and tribunals, right to be presumed innocent unless proven guilty. This is very, very important for us. The moment a person is arrested, the manner in which the media projects, the manner in which the public discourse talks is as if the person is already guilty. But we must remember that till the time the trial takes place and it is the court which will pronounce on the guilt or the innocence of the person, till then the person is presumed to be innocent, and this is an important human right, and this is a right which is binding on India as well. Freedom of thought, conscience, religion, freedom of expression, protection of rights of the child, protection of rights of religious minorities, linguistic minorities, and establishment of a human rights committee to monitor and implement these rights. So there are periodic reports that each of the member states who have ratified this covenant, they have to send periodic reports to the Human Rights Committee talking about the extent to which there has been a compliance with the rights that are stated in the covenant. So the Indian government also sends periodic reports to the Human Rights Committee talking about the extent to which it has been able to comply with all of these rights, and what are the difficulties, what are the challenges, and so on. And then the Human Rights Committee makes certain recommendations which are then to be which are then guiding forces for the country to work on. Yes, I agree with the message that came in the chat. Justice delayed is justice denied. Definitely, right to speedy trial is one of the important human rights as well. These are some of the human rights treaties. You have Universal Declaration of Human Rights that I've talked about. Then you have the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, on Economic, Social, Cultural Rights. Also Convention Against Torture. But this has not been ratified by India yet. However, there is a provision in the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights which talks about every individual's right against torture, against being tortured. So that is covered there, but the Convention Against Torture elaborates it more, and India has not ratified that as well. Convention on the Rights of the Child, Convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. These are conventions which India has ratified. So we are a member state. We are bound by the provisions of these conventions. And then you have on migrant workers and persons with disabilities and all. This is just to show you how a range of important conventions that we have. Many of these conventions the Indian government has ratified, so it is binding on us. Who is responsible for protecting human rights? Some decades ago, the focus was only on the government and every organ of the state. But now the understanding of human rights and the understanding of the discourse around human rights has enlarged, and it is also an individual's responsibility. It is also non-state actors and non-state groups' responsibilities, and also business houses. You may know that in recent times there's a lot of emphasis on business and human rights. So businesses, corporate houses, factories, industries, in many ways they violate human rights, and there is a focus on how they can comply with human rights as well. So, for example, you may have come across the MC Mehta cases. It's a range of cases related to environmental law where factories have released pollutants into the river, and that affects a whole lot of people. Sometimes it could be industrial waste, sometimes it could be nuclear waste. And so there are a whole range of cases related to that. Business and human rights is also about workers' rights and how workers may be kept in a very exploitative condition and how their rights should be looked at and protected. Enforcement mechanisms, you have domestic legislations, judgments, which I will go into in a little while. There are regional systems like regional courts, commissions, tribunals. There are European courts, European Commission for Human Rights, Inter-American Court for Human Rights, African Court for Human Rights. But as far as South Asia is concerned, we have the SARC, but the SARC does not have any regional instrument on human rights yet. And there are people who are working on developing this, so that the reason why a regional system helps is because sometimes crimes and the human rights violations are not within, they are not strictly within the borders of one country. If we take trafficking, for example, trafficking is a human rights violation. There can be somebody who is trafficked from another country, a neighboring country like Nepal, brought into India, and India could be a transit place. From India, the person may be taken to the Middle East countries or to European countries, some other place. So in these situations, it also becomes important to look at human rights in a regional sense and look at the regional system. So through SARC, there is some attempt at coming up with a human rights mechanism. UN charter-based bodies like General Assembly, Security Council, International Court of Justice, Human Rights Council, so all of this exists. Then treaty-based bodies like the Human Rights Committee that I told you about. Then you have UN special rapporteurs and working groups. And you have a universal periodic review, which happens every 4 years. India has actually gone through 3 or 4 cycles of UPR. So in this, other countries review the human rights situation of India and they give recommendations. So these are some of the enforcement mechanisms at the international, regional, and domestic level for human rights. Now I move on to human rights and the police. There are studies that have shown that when police officers treat citizens with dignity and allow them an equal voice in interactions and are guided by transparency and accountability, then that strengthens people's compliance with laws and commission of crimes actually reduces. So there are studies which show this. So the rule of law, which is important, and one of the major police responsibilities is to uphold rule of law. Rule of law actually creates a proper balance between individual rights and public interest. So whenever something happens, when a person, for example, is arrested, that arrest is, there is a balance between public interest and individual rights. Supreme Court judgments on individuals' right to life and liberty, these are binding on everybody within the country, including individuals and the police. NHRC has also, National Human Rights Commission, has also issued several guidelines. For example, guidelines on the use of lie detector tests, police public relations, on arrests, on encounter deaths, and so on. So one of the things that I really want Hello, are you able to hear me now? I've received I see a lot of messages saying that I was inaudible. I'm not sure from which point I became inaudible. Can anyone please tell me? So I will try to repeat the points that were missed out. I think by mistake, I think I was muted at some point, but I don't know at what point I was muted. Can someone please say till what point you were able to hear me so that I can try and repeat, although I have very little time. NHRC guidelines. Okay, thank you, sir. Let me see. Yeah. So thank you. So I was saying that there are NHRC guidelines which are on use of lie detector tests, on police public relations, on arrests, on encounter deaths. So all of this, there are NHRC guidelines. So the point that I was trying to make when accidentally I was muted is that there is no conflict between policing and human rights. Policing means protecting human rights. That is the most important aspect of policing. And human rights are the foundation for policing. We often think that the work of the police is to maintain law and order. But what is that maintaining law and order towards? Maintaining law and order so that there is no human rights violation. So directly policing is about protecting the human rights of everybody. Human rights based policing helps in administration of justice. So I gave an example. So I gave an example of investigation and gathering evidence, and I said that if the police does the investigation and gathering of evidence in a meticulous manner, that actually contributes to the administration of justice. So this is how the work of the police in relation to human rights is actually contributing to the administration of justice, which is an important aspect for us to look at today on the World Day of International Justice. So human rights is viewed as a barrier to policing only by those who do not respect human rights, who do not appreciate the positive benefits of human rights for a just and peaceful society. Only they view human rights as a barrier to policing, but otherwise human rights based policing is what helps with administration of justice. Role of police in protecting human rights. I would say that there are three major aspects: police as state officials, police have the they have the power to use force, but there is also a responsibility in using force. It is about legality, proportionality, and necessity. Police as law enforcers. So enforcing the laws related to human rights, related to criminal law, related to constitutional law, and these include the guidelines issued by the Supreme Court and the NHRC. Police as service providers. So earlier the thought internationally was that police are a tool for state control. But now, over the last few decades, police is being looked at as service providers, as providing a very, very important public service. So police have all these three roles to play. Supreme Court judgments on human rights and criminal law. I'm going to go very, very quickly over this. If anybody has questions, we can take that up during the discussion, during the interactions. So there are Supreme Court judgments on registration of offenses, on investigation of offenses, how should offenses be investigated, particularly, for example, the Delhi Domestic Workers Working Women's Forum. It was about how cases related to rape and sexual offenses, how should they be investigated? What is the kind of sensitivity with which they should be investigated? Arrest and detention. I'm sure all of us know about DK Basu guidelines, but there are other judgments as well. Sheila Barse, for example, is about women prisoners and protecting their rights. Handcuffing and chaining, on that there are Supreme Court judgments and guidelines. Bail and bond. So in what situations can a person be released on personal bond? So those are some of the things that the Supreme Court has given guidelines as well. And compensation when there is a human rights violation. So Neelabati Bera talks about that. So when we look at police responsibilities towards human rights, and this is a discourse from international human rights law, there are three aspects. One is respecting human rights, second is protecting human rights, and the third is fulfilling human rights. So these are three aspects of responsibilities. Respecting is refraining from acting in a manner that violates human rights. Protecting human rights means stopping others from violating human rights. Fulfilling includes creating the appropriate measures for realizing human rights. And there is a concept of due diligence, which measures the extent to which these responsibilities have been fulfilled. Police reform and the human rights of the police. This is very, very important. We keep talking about human rights, but what about the police? Police are also human beings. So police are also entitled to human rights. So even while police is protecting the human rights of others, the police themselves have human rights as well. And there are and the whole aspect of police reform actually works on focusing on the human rights of the police, the working conditions, and so on. There have been many commissions and committees on police reform. The Supreme Court directions in Prakash Singh versus Union of India, that was also on police reform. So in police reform and human rights of the police, there are four aspects on which the Model Police Act is being drafted. One is on functional autonomy of the police, which includes accountability to state executive without interference from it, transparency in appointments, security of tenures, service conditions, state police board for recruitment. So this is aspects of functional autonomy. Next is about professionalism. So efficiency, being responsive to the needs of the people, being professional about the work, dedicated staff for crime investigation. So these are aspects of professionalism. On accountability as well, there are provisions. So accountability for performance, accountability for conduct. And the Supreme Court has actually said that there should be a police complaints authority, and this should comprise of independent, retired high court judges, retired police officers, retired or sitting public administrators, but those should be from another state, and civil society members. So this is what is the accountability system that the Supreme Court has suggested. And improved service conditions, which is very, very important, because the kind of work that each of you does is very, very stressful. It is long hours of work. Many times it is very risky work. So improved working hours, rest and leisure, compensatory benefits, healthcare, housing, financial security, insurance, stress management. So police reform and human rights of the police includes all these aspects that I've talked about here. What are some of the challenges to implementation of human rights? I'm putting the challenges in four categories, and these categories were not created by me. These were categories which were highlighted by Kofi Annan, who was the former Secretary General of the UN. So first, change to implementation is the knowledge gap. So awareness raising becomes important, and this is where what CAPT is doing is of immense significance to close this knowledge gap. Second aspect is capacity gap. So there may be knowledge, but the skills and the capacity is required, which is why capacity building becomes important. For example, strengthening cyber policing is very important given the kind of cyber crimes and the enormity of cyber crimes that are happening. The other aspect is addressing underrepresentation of women in the police force. Third aspect is protection gap, which means that there may be knowledge, there may be capacity, but there is no proper protection of human rights that is happening. And here, the focus needs to be on implementing the human rights standards. And the fourth is the commitment gap, where there needs to be a strong commitment to human rights and a commitment to understand that human rights is a very, very essential foundational aspect of policing, and that is going to contribute to justice. So enacting the Model Police Act and effective implementation of that becomes an important aspect. Towards a smart police force for protecting human rights. So if we take smart, we are saying S for strict yet sensitive, M for modern and mobile, A for alert and accountable, R for reliable and responsive, and T for tech savvy and trained. So all of this will create a smart police force which will protect human rights and which will then contribute to the administration of justice. So I end with this particular last slide, which is food for thought and discussion. So what do we see as the role of police in protecting the human rights of all? And what is the relevance of human rights discourse in the present context of policing in India? So these are questions which I also have, and I hope that through the interaction that we have in the next how many ever minutes that we have, I hope that some of you will not only ask me questions, but also give me some of your ideas and thoughts, because I also would like to learn from your experience and your perspectives. Thank you.
Now the house is open for question answers. To the participants, feel free to ask questions. Or if you are unable to speak out, you can write your questions on chat box also. And I am requesting from the eminent speaker to kindly see the chat box for addressing the participants.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm looking at the chat box right now.
Participants, now you can unmute yourself and ask questions one by one, please. Firstly, raise hand, unmute yourself, and then ask the questions.
Inspector Mudassir Amin from Jammu and Kashmir Police. Ma'am, I have a simple question. What is the image of the civilian vis-a-vis the image of the Jammu and Kashmir Police?
I'm sorry, not clear to me.
Kindly write your question in chat box. Actually, little buffering is there and your voice is not clear. Write your question in chat box, please.
It is so nice to see all of you from different parts of the country. I think I saw somebody from Assam and from different places. So I'm really amazed at the technology that is allowing us to have this conversation across the country. Okay, somebody from the IT cell in Khammam. Thank you so much. Okay, there is a question that has come in. It's probably come in privately. What steps can individuals and governments take to ensure that perpetrators of international crimes are held accountable and justice is served for the victims? Thank you very much, Apurba Jyoti Das ji. Thank you very much for this question. See,
Hello,
perpetrators of international crimes, they are there everywhere in many countries. Now, one of the things that can happen is that we the domestic justice mechanisms so that whenever there are perpetrators of international crimes who are there in our soil, in Indian soil, we should be able to take action against them, conduct the trial within our country. And if every country does that, that is actually going to help in justice for the victims. It is also going to act as a deterrent. Right now, many of the international crimes that are committed, whether it is genocide, whether it is war crimes, these are being committed because the people who commit them, they know that they have safe havens. They know that if they flee to certain countries, they will probably not be prosecuted, they will not be arrested, there will be no action taken against them. So one step that individuals can help the government with is providing suggestions on how do we tighten and strengthen our legal machinery so that perpetrators of international crimes can be held accountable within the country. The International Criminal Court is a court of last resort. How many cases will go before the ICC? How many cases are even being convicted or prosecuted? Very few cases. It's like a handful. But what is important is strengthening our domestic legal machinery so that within the country, let's say somebody has committed genocide in another country, has fled to India. Either India should have the legal mechanisms in place to try the person within the country, to prosecute the person within the country. Otherwise, arrest the person and hand over the person to the ICC so that the ICC can then take it up. If either of this takes place, then justice for the victims is provided. I hope I have answered your question, sir. Okay, there is another question here from Mudasir Hamid ji. Why is the image of police portrayed in a wrong way in Bollywood or in a macho way? A very, very important question. Well, I have no idea why it is portrayed like that in Bollywood. I think, one will have to ask the directors in Bollywood about this. But I think, there is this popular perception that, the Bollywood produces it things are according to what the public wants. So Bollywood directors probably think that this is what the public thinks of the police. But I think the public perception of the police is also very much influenced by what the media shows. What is it that the newspapers show? What is it that both the print medium as well as the electronic mediums? How do they show? What is the light in which they show the police and they portray the police? That also becomes important. And yes, police is portrayed in a wrong way, and I completely accept that. And I think there are police officials who are very, very honest and very who have a lot of integrity, who are trying to follow the laws, follow all the procedures. And those kind of honest, hardworking officers with integrity and the kind of sacrifice that they are making, the kind of long hours of work, the kind of risk that they face on a day-to-day basis, also how that affects their personal life, how little time they are able to give their family because of this public service. I think these are aspects which need to be portrayed more and more. And at the same time, while we are talking about human rights of police personnel, we also talk about human rights of the individuals, which the police and everybody else has to respect. So it is about both of these. Umesh Kumar ji has asked from Sundar Bani, I think, why human rights is applicable to course. Sorry, I don't understand the question. But what I tried to show is that human rights are applicable to all. And while the police in its work as policing is focusing on protecting the human rights, for example, if there is a murder and there is an investigation of a murder that takes place, murder itself is a human rights violation. It is a crime, it is an offense, but it is also a human rights violation because somebody has taken away the right to life, which is at the core of the human rights, right? So when the police are investigating a murder case, what they are actually doing is helping to protect the human rights. And they are, by doing that investigation, they are actually contributing to the justice process. So this is how I look at the work of the police as a very, very important aspect of promoting human rights. Despite same should be followed by all, but they don't follow. What steps can Human Rights Commission take? This is from Umesh Kumar ji. I was again muted for some reason. I'm not sure who is muting me. Is the time over, sir? Is that
No,
why I
ma'am,
was
please
muted?
carry on. Please carry on. Please carry on, ma'am.
Okay,
Please take
fine.
the question.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Ma'am, can you take my one question, ma'am, please?
Yes. So, despite the same should be followed by all, they are not following. What steps can Human Rights Commission take? So, as I talked about the Model Police Act, the Model Police Act actually has a provision for a separate complaints redressal mechanism where when the police do not follow the human rights, or there is some kind of a violation, that will then be taken up by this independent complaints mechanism. So this is what the Model Police Act talks about, but sure all are aware schedule of the Indian Constitution. So it is about individual state governments which have to then adopt on Model Police Act, and they have to bring about this kind of police. Now I have a question. The role of NHRC in protecting rights in case of modern day crimes like cyber crimes, extortion, honey traps, etc. NHRC can provide guidelines. I think if we understand the role of NHRC and the role of the courts, we will see that the National Human Rights Commission is not a court of law, right? So the National Human Rights Commission can provide guidelines. It can also, to an extent, it can raise questions, ask for accountability, and provide compensation perhaps. But beyond that, these are aspects, whether we talk about cyber crimes and honey traps and so on, these are make the perpetrators accountable is the job of the court, not the NHRC. NHRC can provide guidelines, but it will be the court which determines the innocence of the person. The police personnel will be guiding and contributing to that process of the court. This is how I see it, but I would okay, Anit Gunji has asked a question. Will Uniform Civil Code help to protect human rights and deliver equal justice to, are you able to hear me? And I'm hearing some noises, so I'm not sure. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Okay. So, Anit Gunji, I have just unmuted myself. I don't know why I was muted once again. So I was talking about the Uniform Civil Code in response to Anit Gunji's question. And my response is that yes, you are right. There are India. Okay, so India is full of different types of diversities, yes. So making a uniform civil code is very, very challenging. In fact, other countries are moving towards plural laws. Instead of having one law, they are moving towards plural laws. So I think that's something that one needs to really think about. Brijbhushan ji, I don't really, I think yours is a comment and not a question. So I really have no comments on that. Why do some groups require special human rights? This was asked by Jitu Mani Nath ji. Why do some groups require special human rights? Does this mean that they have more rights than others? Thank you very much for this very, very important question, sir. No, it doesn't mean that they have more rights than the others. What it means is that even when we are talking about human rights for all, justice for all, when we talk about equal rights for everyone, we still understand, and the law understands, that the society is not equal. The community is not equal. There are some communities which are more vulnerable than others to human rights violations. There are some people who are more vulnerable to human rights violations than others. And this is something that the law recognizes. For example, children. Children, because they cannot defend themselves the way an adult can, they are more vulnerable to human rights violations within the family, within the community, and so on. So there are special rights provided to children. Does that mean that they have more rights, children have more rights than adults? No. But because of their age, there is a vulnerability that the law recognizes. That is why there are specific rights. Similarly, rights for women. The kind of vulnerability to rape, to sexual violence, those are recognized by the courts, recognized by law, and that is why there are certain guidelines which are given. For example, in Delhi domestic workers case, the court talked about how when a rape victim goes to the police, what is the duty of the police? How should the investigation be conducted? How should the medical examination, forensic evidence be gathered? So all of this, there are guidelines. Does this mean that all women have more human rights than all men? No, it doesn't mean that. It only means that in certain situations, women are in a more vulnerable situation. And so in those situations, their human rights are specially protected. That is what it means. So I hope with the examples that I've given on children and on women, I hope that my answer is I have been able to answer your question, Jitumani ji. Okay, Nafis ji has written, might is right, is the new normal. Okay, I think it's a comment. There are some inmates whose cases are pending for last 6 to 7 years. What is the procedure to give them relief in interest of justice? This is a question from Jagjit Chaudhary ji to everyone. My answer is that if we look at the COVID time, even before COVID, there have been judgments of the Supreme Court which say that if there are people who are languishing in the jail and as under trials, that means their case has not been heard yet, but they have been in jail for a longer term than the punishment that is prescribed for whatever crime they have committed. For the crime they've committed, suppose the punishment is a maximum of 3 years, but they, as under trial, they have been languishing in the jail for 7 years. The Supreme Court again and again has said that such under trials must be released because they have already, even while being under trials, they have completed the period of punishment. So they should be released. At the time of COVID also, the Supreme Court came up with such orders that those who have committed more minor offenses, they must be released, and that is because the jails were overcrowded, and when jails are overcrowded in a COVID situation, that actually leads to the spread of COVID. So these are some of the measures which are being taken, but I think the crux of the problem really that Jagjit ji is pointing out here is about the need for speedy trial. And I'm sure as police officials, all of you are aware of how many years it takes for a case to be concluded. And it is concluded at the sessions court, but then it goes on appeal to High Court. Then in some cases, it goes on appeal to Supreme Court. This entire procedure can take 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Then what is the justice that we are talking about? So speedy trial becomes a very, very important aspect. At the same time, that speedy trial should not bypass the procedures of fairness, right? So fair procedures which are established by law, those have to be followed, and speedy trial becomes necessary. I think I've kind of answered whatever were the questions which have been posed in the chat box. If there are other questions, please type it into the chat box, because my chat box is open. I can see it immediately and I can respond to it. Okay, Ashutosh Mishra ji has asked a question here, and Ashutosh ji has said that we find NHRC is simply taking cognizance of cases of death, and specifically it appears that these are related to giving compensation, which only enables the advocates. It appears that they are not interested in real violation of other offenses which appear to be discriminatory. Same happens with state human rights commissions as well. What is the solution? See, the National Human Rights Commission and the State Human Rights Commission, these are institutions which have been established by us. When I say us, I mean by all of us, represented by the government, of course. So if in your opinion you find that the NHRC is not doing what it's supposed to do, we have a Protection of Human Rights Act, and it is under the Protection of Human Rights Act that the National Human Rights Commission and the State Human Rights Commission have been established. In fact, the Protection of Human Rights Act also talks about establishing human rights courts in each of the districts. But that still has not been implemented even from 1993 till now. So it's been 30 years, but we still don't have human rights courts at the grassroots level, at the district level, as has been talked about in the Protection of Human Rights Act. So if we find that the NHRC is not doing what it is set out to do, or it is not doing enough, or it is not working effectively, I think it is important for us to point that out, maybe by articles, maybe by writing to the NHRC and getting them to focus on the real violation of offenses. Because I think even in terms of the NHRC, it has a hierarchy of the human rights violations, and it looks at what it considers to be the more serious violations. So I think it's important for us to take action if we want the NHRC to function in a better way. Bedanga Sarma ji has asked a question. Is it possible to include human rights awareness in school curriculums? Definitely, sir. I think many states are actually doing this. And they are including, for example, in civics, I think they are including human rights. In fact, some years ago, now my children are older, but when they were younger, I have taught them about fundamental rights, about human rights in their curriculum under civics. So I think there is human rights awareness which is incorporated into the school curriculums, but how effective it is, I'm really not sure. How much is it that children understand? And for them to understand, the teachers who teach them, they also have to understand. If they consider human rights to be one more topic on which they have to get the students to memorize things, then the students are not going to understand the essence of human rights. Because I'm a person who has worked, I have worked as a lawyer, and then I'm now an academic. I'm a professor of law in a reputed university in India. So I have a certain perspective of human rights that I can then pass on to my children. But I'm really not sure to what extent the teachers in the schools have a grasp over human rights. And I think that becomes necessary if we really want to see the school children learning about human rights. So it is one thing to add it into their school textbooks, but for them to understand, it is largely about developing the capacities of the teachers, that the students will understand the importance of human rights. I hope I've answered your question. Let me just see. Nafis Ahmed ji has asked, please tell the success story of NHRC, if any. I think there are many cases in which NHRC has provided compensation. as I said, NHRC cannot conduct trials. It is not a court of law, but it provides compensation. It conducts inquiries. It provides compensation. The NHRC also sometimes investigates, or it calls people and makes inquiries and does fact finding if the Supreme Court calls upon the NHRC to do so. So in some situations, the NHRC has done that based on the Supreme Court asking it to go to a particular area, find out what are the facts, what are the human rights violations that have happened, and then the NHRC has submitted its report to the Supreme Court. For example, in Chhattisgarh, with the Salva Judum, there were many complaints of violations, and at that time, the Supreme Court had directed the NHRC to go to Chhattisgarh, to the affected areas like in Bastar and other areas, and to find out what exactly is the situation, because the Supreme Court sitting in Delhi, it cannot find out what is happening at the ground level. So it asked the NHRC to conduct that fact finding, and based on its report, then the Supreme Court acted upon it. So that is one of the ways in which the NHRC helps. I think the question of uniform civil code I've already spoken about, so I don't want to repeat it because we don't have enough time. Nafis G has asked another question about freedom fighters. Our freedom fighters were very much aware of their human rights, and they know how to assert their human rights without this much of activism in form of seminars, debates, and now this webinar. I think it's a comment and not a question. So I really have no response to that. That's the last comment that I see in the chat box. If there are any more, please type into the chat box and I will be able to respond. Parvez ji, how much more time do we have?
You can take 20 more minutes, ma'am. We have 20 minutes more.
We have 20 minutes, you're saying?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, I have an observation.
The audio is not very clear to me, so if you can please type in your question, that will be good. But there are also several comments which are being typed, and thank you for that, because that also gives me a sense of where we are and how we think about things. So that's helpful to me as well. So it can be a comment or a question. Either way, please type into the chat box. Although my audio volume in my laptop is at 100%, but somehow the audio is not very clear to me.
There is a judicial concept that justice should not only be done, but it should seem to have been done. And the biggest problem which I personally and practically found during the investigation of the cases is that the latest Supreme Court judgments, latest Supreme Court guidelines are not being communicated to the officers in field. And that is taking a very heavy toll on the investigation of cases, and then that ultimately leads to the travesty of the justice, because the concerned investigating officer is not in know-how of the latest High Court and Supreme Court judgments vis-a-vis the investigation or the new offenses which are being done. What's your view about this and how to tackle this very important issue?
Thank you, Mudassir ji. I'm not sure that I understood your question properly. You started by talking about that justice should not only be done, but also seen to be done. So that is important. Yes, as a principle, what that also talks about is principle, and also when there is a conflict of interest. For example, if we look at some courts, some judgments, when there are judges who withdraw from hearing a particular case, they rescind from hearing a particular case. That's because maybe one of the lawyers who's arguing the case is their relative, or if it's a company related matter, maybe this judge has certain shares in that company, so there is a conflict of interest, so the judge will then withdraw from that particular trial. And this is an important aspect, because even if the judge is not biased, even if the judge is very, very objective, even then the judge may be seen to be biased. So this important concept that you are talking about, that justice should not only be done but also seen to be done, that then becomes a very important aspect. The next thing that you talked about, Mudassir ji, is that when the IOs are investigating various cases, they are not aware of the Supreme Court guidelines, the latest Supreme Court guidelines. I think that is what you were referring to, if I'm not mistaken. I understand that there are Supreme Court guidelines which are being Supreme Court NHRC guidelines which are coming up in so many cases, and it becomes very difficult to keep track, especially when the IO is so busy with investigating a case. It is difficult for them to also simultaneously keep themselves updated on the latest judgments and the latest guidelines and so on. I completely understand the difficulty, and I think that is where webinars and training sessions and seminars like what we are having right now, those become important, and the work of CAPT becomes very, very important. This is why, for me as well, at a personal, professional level, 2 years ago, I was invited by CAPT to to speak to all of you, and I did that. And this time when Parvez ji contacted me again, I readily agreed, because this is very, very important work of explaining what the guidelines are. All of you are so busy in your work, it is difficult to keep updated with all the guidelines and the Supreme Court judgments and what it is saying. Yet it is important for you to know that. So I think webinars like this may actually help. Okay, Apurva Jyoti Das ji has written, it's like a vote of thanks, I think. Thank you, Apurva Jyoti ji, for your kind words, that you were able to see my passion through what I talked. Thank you so much. Ashish ji has asked about AFSPA. AFSPA is Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It is not applicable in all parts of the country, but it's applicable in some parts of the country. AFSPA is applicable to parts of northeastern states, and it's also applicable to Kashmir. And under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, there are certain very, very strong powers that are given to the armed forces, including to search, seize articles, to arrest, and so on. And the whole controversy, if I can use the word controversy, the whole controversy about AFSPA and human rights violations is because there have been reported cases or reported instances where during this search and seizure or during arrests, the human rights of the persons who are arrested or the persons whose houses are being searched, those human rights have not been respected. And that is why AFSPA then becomes a huge human rights issue, because while it is important to give certain powers to the armed forces, while it is important to give certain powers to the armed forces, given the situation that they are in, whether it is a situation of insurgency and so on, but along with that power, there should also be built in some checks and balances, and there should be some sense of responsibility. Those checks and balances are very little in Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which is why there has been a lot of discussion about AFSPA. Jitu ji, you have asked me a very important question about how to minimize delay in justice. I think there are a lot of vacancy of judges which are yet to be fulfilled. When this vacancy of judges is fulfilled and the judges are appointed, I think the courts will be, because there are many courts, I'm sure even in your district, whichever district you are from, I'm sure when you go to the district court, you will find that there are courtrooms which are empty. That's because the judge has been transferred to somewhere else, or the judge has been promoted, there is a vacancy, but then no judge has been appointed. And all of these are ways in which there is a delay of justice as well. So I think that is one of the major aspects. As a police force, it's difficult for you to be able to do something about that, because appointment of judges is the job of the, is not the job of the police. But what the police force can do is, in terms of investigation, one can be meticulous and try to minimize the time within which investigation is completed. And if investigation takes a shorter time, that also will lead to speedy justice. So that is one way in which it can be done as well. Thank you. Parvez ji, I think from my side, I've exhausted all the questions that were posed to me in the chat box. Can I hand it over to you, back to you?
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your words of wisdom. Now, I would like to call Sri Amit Atut, Assistant Director, to propose vote of thanks. Amit Atut, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I audible, Parvez?
Yes.
Yes. Voice is breaking, sir.
Sir. Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of Director CEPT, I convey my gratitude to Dr. Soumya Uma, Professor of Law in Jindal Global Law School, OP Jindal Global University, ma'am, for excellent and meaningful session in this lecture series on World Day for International Justice. Ma'am, this lecture series was a part of Government of India campaign that focuses on various measures people and police officials should adopt to comply with the safety regulations led by the government and which subsequently ensure human rights of citizens and international justice. Ma'am, during your deliberations, with the help of presentation, experience sharing, and question answer session, you have beautifully covered all the aspects of international justice, human rights, its conceptual issues, and steps that we require to take for creating awareness in society. We are truly enriched with the knowledge and insight given by you on the subject, and it will certainly create awareness in all the participants of various organizations who joined this lecture series. I urge you to please keep on sharing your experience and guidance to officers in future also. I also want to thank all the participants for sparing your valuable time and active participation in this online lecture series. And it's an urge for all to please be participants in our future events also. In the last but not least, I want to convey my compliments to Shri Parvez Aslam Ansari, Assistant Director, and his team uh, for organizing this lecture series and providing a platform for participants to learn, gain knowledge, and aware on the human rights and international justice issues. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for sparing your valuable time and enlightening us with your session, meaningful session. Thank you all. Thank you to all the participants for being with us last time. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Our lecture series is over.